that sort of thing. Well, Lisk hopes to help developers build blockchain technology into their applications without having to handle all the peer-to-peer stuff and issuing their own coins. And they can, but it's very customizable. But it's something that hopefully lets them do it with a lot less hassle, so they can focus on their applications. So that's one of the goals of Lisk, and it has some features to it that we'll get into later that I think provide it and make it very well suited for that role. Now, in addition to learning about blockchain, learning about Lisk, I have one sort of ulterior motive as well. And if there's enough interest, I'm kind of interested in seeing if we can work with some of the other meetups in the community and maybe come up with a proof of concept for applying blockchain technology, maybe getting together with the Do Lab and trying to make something Internet of Things, work off the blockchain. That's going to be further down the road, but if there's enough interest, it's something I would definitely be interested in exploring. I love where different groups can get together and synergize. When I first came to Geekdom, they gave us the grand tour, and they told us about a project they had done where it was basically kind of a startup competition where anybody could walk in and say, pitch an idea for a startup. And everybody there would then vote on the startup. And they eventually chose one and said, hey, we like this one, so this is going to be the winner. At that point, everybody started trying to basically advance that startup and see if they could make it happen, and they did. I believe that the winner of this particular case was basically a vending machine you could just walk right up to, take your stuff out of, not have to push any buttons, just walk up and grab it, and it knew exactly what you had and could ring you up. So I believe it could even charge you. It already knew who you were. It could charge you as you walked out the door. So it was a really cool idea. It's something that Geekdom actually managed to do, and this is like a real deal project that's come out now. Now, I don't think we're going to try to make a business or anything out of it, but I do think it'd be cool to come up with a proof of concept. So if there's enough interest again down the road and we can build the right relationships, I think that'd be something really cool to do. So if you're interested in something like that, have any ideas for it, let me know, and we'll take a look at it. Now, this meetup today, we're going to divide into 3 different parts. So I'm going to give an introduction to blockchain technology. So it's going to be a lot of nuts and bolts of how this stuff works, or at least the general concepts of how it works. It may not be exact systems that are currently in place for different projects, but it'll talk about some of the technology and ideas and that they're using to solve different problems. After that, we're going to have Matthew Chauvin. He has a finance background, and he's going to kind of talk about the use case of blockchain as a currency. So the blockchain can be used as money. It can also be just used as showing ownership of assets. It can be programmed to track different events, and when certain events happen, to make things happen. There's a lot that can be done with it, but he's going to talk about the use case of blockchain as money itself. So kind of like Bitcoin, Litecoin, that sort of thing. Then after that, we have Edward Trosclair. He is the official Lisk USA ambassador. He's flown in from Louisiana, and he's been gracious enough to sponsor our event. Now, as official Lisk USA ambassador, what Edward's job is to do is to basically support the Lisk community, to promote the Lisk ecosystem, and to provide technical support. Now, on top of being an ambassador, Edward also has a role of, he's an official Lisk delegate. So he is one of the people who basically help process Lisk transactions. There's 101 delegates, and everybody who owns any Lisk can basically vote on whatever delegate they want, as long as the person's running as delegate. And Edward's got enough votes to be one of the official 101 delegates. So that's pretty cool as well. So he's very involved in the Lisk community, and one of his jobs as being a delegate is to again try to help the community itself. So that's one of the nice features of Lisk with the voting. These delegates, to keep their place, they do earn rewards for processing those transactions. They want to keep earning rewards, and they've got to help the community, make people believe like, hey, you're the guy that I want doing this because you do lots of good for us. All right. So that's my intro. Let me see if we can get started on the presentation. I'm going to dim the lights real quick. Okay, so, is it okay? So what is a blockchain? A blockchain is a distributed database that runs on a peer-to-peer network that maintains a growing list of chronological records known as blocks. And hashing and public key cryptography ensure that the records of blocks cannot be forwarded or altered retroactively. So we're going to break it down a little bit. We have an example here of two different systems. So the one on the left is centralized, the one on the right is a distributed system. Now in a centralized system, basically all the data, all the processing, it all passes through a central point. Now that point may be one computer, maybe it's a group of computers kind of controlled by one particular entity. And then each point surrounding that center point may be users of the system. Now in a distributed system, basically each point, at least in the blockchain case, can have an entire copy of the database. Any of the transactions can go through them. If they want some information that they don't have, they may be able to get it from any other point on the blockchain. And so that provides some benefits. The first benefit from a distributed system is that it often has increased availability. So on a centralized system, if you take up that center point, then the whole thing goes down. But on a distributed system, well, what point do you take out? Everybody has a copy of all the data. It may be set up so they can all process the data. It's very hard to knock out any one point and then take down the whole network. So it's a very resilient sort of setup. And also being able to get the data from multiple parties, sometimes, depending on what's going on in the background, it can actually be faster as well. So distributed networks can be censorship resistant, harder to attack through flooding them with lots of data requests, trying to overwhelm them, and it can be potentially faster. Now, another benefit of a distributed system is that you have increased data integrity. So if every point on this network has an entire copy of the data, then if anyone loses their data, then everybody else still has a copy. So that's another advantage of being able to spread this out and having a distributed network. Whereas on a centralized system, if all the data is in one place, you lose that, then potentially you've lost your data integrity. Now having everybody with a copy also does one more thing, and that makes it harder to modify covertly records. So if one point of a distributed network decides, hey, I'm going to modify this, well, everybody else has their own copy. They can basically see and say, well, that doesn't match ours, what gives? And they can start examining that issue further. Why is this guy's copy different? So it can be harder to forge records and that sort of thing. Now, in a centralized system, a lot of times everything goes through one central person or business or whatnot. And so businesses, people, they're able to insert themselves as middlemen into different sort of transactions. With a distributed system, there's no central point, so you have a potential for being able to cut out middlemen. A lot of times when you cut out middlemen, you can reduce costs. You don't have to wait on the middleman to do anything. Maybe they're a hold up in some sort of process you're doing. You may be able to speed up the pace of your transactions by getting rid of middlemen. And again, with every point on the network being able to transact with all the other points, they basically be able to do business with your neighbors instead of having to have a central go-between. Now, there's some consequences of centralization that blockchain tends to limit. The consequences, 3 of them, are inefficiency, delays, and increased costs. So what we have here, and I apologize for the projector, it's supposed to be an orange color, but apparently the light bulbs need replacing. But imagine somebody, they're going through the medical system, and they're saying doctors, emergency rooms, radiologists, each of these folks has their own centralized system where all the data gets piled into. And they don't necessarily share it very easily with everybody else. And so you end up with these things called data silos. And so believe it or not, in the medical industry, a lot of these folks still fax records back and forth, and they may have to wait a while on the fax. If all of these folks actually shared their data in one place and maybe more of a distributed network, then you could cut out the fax machines, you could get what you need without having to wait on the overwhelmed medical assistant in the office on the other side of town. And of course, having all these extra people process these faxes all that increased costs. So it's another benefit of distributing the data around would be that you can reduce costs. Now, there was a study recently done by Lisk who they're looking at applying blockchain technology through a project called Hyperledger, and they wanted to see, well, what ways can we increase efficiency in what we do? So they examined the shipment of basically a box or a boxcar of roses from Kenya to the Netherlands. And what they discovered was, between all the different government entities and the carriers and the ports, brokers, import-exporters, freight forwarders, all that, there was about 200 different communications that were in piles of paper that would build up from trying to make this shipment. And they would have to wait on people. It takes several weeks sometimes to ship roses. Of course, roses are a perishable item. It's something you've got to ship quickly. So what they wanted to look at is, what if all these people, once they did what they needed to do, what if we posted that information to the blockchain, to a shared database where everybody could access? Well, maybe the government is able to say, okay, well, has this, and this been filed? Well, they can check the blockchain themselves without waiting for facts. They can just say, okay, it does. They can even program it so that if this, and this happen, as soon as that does, maybe they sign off and get their approval for the next thing down the road. So by using this sort of system that everybody shares and can post to in a secure way, then they may be able to provide for more efficiencies. Now, one reason we have middlemen, and it's not the only reason, middlemen do add value in some cases. So there is a role for middlemen and everything. I mean, they're not all bad folks. Sometimes they make our lives better by providing value-added services to different transactions that we're involved in. But sometimes they're involved just because we don't or can't, for whatever reason, trust each other. So we're going to look at an example here. And here we have Alice and Bob. Alice has some money, and she wants this package from Bob. Except, Bob doesn't necessarily trust that Alice has the money, and maybe Alice doesn't trust that Bob's has the actual goods. Maybe it's just an empty box. So how can she do business with Bob? And because Bob does look a little sketchy. How can she do business with Bob in a reliable, trustable way? Well, the current solution is maybe they both know and trust Sally. Right? And so Sally gets between the two of them, and Alice feels perfectly okay with giving her money to Sally, and Bob says, okay, I'll give you my package. Well, I trust you, Sally. And then Sally can make sure everything's kosher and it's legit and it's okay. And then she can pass the package to Alice and the money to Bob. Now, of course, Sally decides that, hey, I can make some money on this deal. And so your transaction costs have gone up. And so we see this in different situations that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. One, of course, is Visa. As we talked about, I may not trust the other. If I'm a merchant, I may not trust the buyer that they really have the money if they just hand me this piece of plastic. How do I know I'm really going to get paid? And Visa takes a percent. Now I'm an attorney, and I accept visas as part of my business. And in my practice, it's about 2.5%. So if I have $1,000 transaction, then Visa keeps about $25 for their role in solving this trust problem that we have. You can see another example of a middleman is Uber. If I need a ride, I may not trust that this guy that I'm going to get in the car with, maybe he's a felon, maybe he's a serial killer. I don't know. Well, Uber I know has done at least a background check, a rudimentary one. And maybe they manage the reputations, and they can see that, well, this guy's driven these for a bunch of other people, and he's got good reviews, and nobody's had any problems so far. So I feel like, okay, I'll use Uber as my trusted middleman. Of course, I have to pay a fee. Now, Uber, if you're an Uber driver, anybody driven for Uber before? Well, if you know, they get about 30%, 25 to 30% of the ride. Of course, it's your car, it's your gas, it's your time, it's potentially your life. But they're getting 25 to 30% because they're solving this trust issue for us. So one thing that blockchain has the potential of being really good at is to allow us to do business in a trustable way without the need for Visa or Uber to get in between us. We may be able to do business kind of face to face, at least through a cryptographic blockchain instead. Now, I want to show you how bad this has gotten with Visa, because it's not only Visa that people don't trust. This is basically this is how a Visa card gets processed. There's 4 different parties involved. You have a card holder, you have the card issuer, so the cardholder gets his card from his Visa card from a card issuer, and then you have the Visa network, and then you have something called an acquirer, who basically helps the merchants process the Visa transactions, and then you have the merchants. So you go to the store, this is basically what happens. So you present your card to the merchant swipes the card, and he's got to get some authorization. So he sends the request to his acquirer, the acquirer sends it to VisaNet, VisaNet sends it to the card issuer checks, okay, does this guy have the money? And then if he does, they said to the acquirer, okay, this guy has the money, you may proceed, Mr. Merchant. And the merchant processes the transaction. Now at that point, everybody's got to get paid. And so the merchant gives the acquirer the transaction receipt, and the acquirer pays the merchant. Now the acquirer's got to get paid by VisaNet, so they get their money back. So they just gave it to the merchants, so they give the receipt to VisaNet, who then gives it to the cardholder, who then finally gives the receipt to the cardholder, and each along the way, except the money's kind of getting shuffled around. So all of that is because basically nobody trusts anybody. So again, blockchain can eliminate some of this complexity, and is it a wonder? I mean, 2.5% of all this seems kind of cheap to me, honestly. All right, so we've looked at how blockchain is a distributed database, and it runs on a peer-to-peer network. Now, the next part of the definition is that it maintains a growing list of chronological records known as blocks. So what kind of records are we talking about? Your imagination is basically the limit to what sort of records you can handle or process with a blockchain. The easiest use case is money. That's your classic case of Bitcoin, where I send this coin, which is supposed to be worth something to somebody, and maybe they give me something in exchange for dollars or a product, a pack of socks, who knows. Now, the coins on a blockchain, or basically an address containing ones and zeros, but you can basically say that this address owns this stock, this bond, this mutual fund, this derivative. And you can trade those around just by sending messages out to the blockchain saying transfer this stock to this address. It could also be used for rights and obligations. So one crowdfunding initiative out there, or project out there, is Kickstarter. Does everybody know how Kickstarter works? And so with Kickstarter, basically somebody promises a future product to somebody who invests money in them, or gives them money to develop it. And if everything goes well, the project develops this product, and then they give whoever gave them money, the first usage of it. Now Kickstarter's in the middle of all that. Of course, they're arranging taking care of some of the trust issues, and they charge a fee. Now, what if you actually were able to do that yourself? What if you're able to issue your own coin in exchange for cash for development, and whenever you finally finish off the product, the person with the coin could exchange it back to you, and you give them the product. Well, what if they instead, I'm just kind of tired of waiting on this, or maybe I don't have an interest in that product, maybe they could sell that coin to somebody else. And that's something you don't see, I don't think, on Kickstarter now, but you could potentially put into effect with blockchains. Another use is mortgages and loans. So, some of these records are gotten to the point where they're essentially programmable now. And they do these things called smart contracts, where you can say, if this, and this happened, then send this coin over here. So in the case of a mortgage, you might have something called a smart contract that resides on a blockchain, where it accepts payments. You owe money on your house. You make payments to this contract. And then once you make your last payment, the contract automatically sends you the title. Another example of use of a blockchain. As we saw a second ago, blockchain can track events, like in that Maersk example, where they're talking about government signed off on this, or this piece of paper has been filed, or there's all the events on the supply chain. Maybe they can track food back to the source of the farm. You might be able to, if this package was stamped correctly, you might be able to tell all the way back where that food came from. Was that truly grass-fed beef, or did it come from some stockyard? So there's a lot of different things you can do with blockchain. And again, your imagination is basically the limit on what you can do with it. So how can transactions work using blockchain? So here we have Allison and Bob again, and Alice wants to get some money to Bob. So basically what happens is that Alice broadcasts to the network, hey, Alice sends 20 coins to Bob. And all these different points of the network, they're paying attention to, they're listening for broadcasts. And later we're going to see what they do with them. But if we use this system, we've got a problem. Remember, Bob is kind of a sketchy guy. What if Bob gets up and says, Alice sends 20 coins to Bob? Well, Alice probably wouldn't be very, very happy with that if the network actually paid attention. So how do we stop that? Well, right now, let's say you're writing a check. Well, Alice might sign her check. And so maybe the bank checks the signature, and if Bob were to try to forge Alice's signature, maybe they know, hey, that's not Alice's signature. But in the world of computers and the digital world, a signature is just a bunch of ones and zeros. So how do we do that on the internet, online, with computers? I mean, Bob could still say Alice sends 100 coins. He's getting more ambitious. And then sign it, Alice says 1110 for Alice. That doesn't work. So what do we do to keep Bob from forging Alice's transactions? This next part is one of the key concepts of a blockchain, one of the key tools of a blockchain, and that's called public key cryptography. And as a subset of that, there's something called digital signatures. So with public key cryptography and digital signatures, every user generates what's called a public-private key pair. These are two different numbers that are basically ones and zeros of a certain length. They're mathematically relatable, but you can't just look at one and know what the other is. Now, the public key, you're free to give to anybody, and in fact, that's how things get verified, as you'll see in a moment. But your secret key, you're not supposed to give anybody. And these two keys are used to generate a signature that basically cannot, or there's one star in the entire universe chance of actually hacking it. So how does that work? Well, we use something for signing. We use something called a sign function. Before your eyes glaze over with these funny looking things, this is basically a black box that you put in an input, and out comes a signature. So in this case, if you want to have this pretty much unhackable signature, you put in your message and you put in your secret key, and out comes your signature. Now, when you look at the signature, you're never going to be able to tell what the message was, but somebody's going to be able to check that and know for a fact that the person who sent the message is the person who had the right secret key, or else they could not have generated that particular signature. One of the main features of this sign function is that if you make even the smallest change, the signature changes in a big way. So up here you'll see that first time we put in Alice sends 20 coins to Bob. And she also puts in her secret key, and out comes a signature. Well, if she tried it again, and this time put Alice sends 20.0001 coins to Bob, out comes a completely different signature. So this is going to be useful as far as keeping Alice's transactions secure. So here's what it would look like if she tries to do this on the network. First, she would, on her own, put in her message and her secret key and get her signature. And then she basically group that together into a transaction that says, okay, I'm sending 20 coins to Bob, and I'm signing it with this very special signature. And then I broadcast it to the network. And the network is listening, and later on we'll see exactly what they do with that. So if we do that, and we run Alice's transaction through that and get her signature, Bob isn't able to change anything about this. He can't say Alice sends 30 coins to Bob and then use the signature that Alice did on the 20 coin transaction, because the 30 would completely change the signature. You cannot alter the transaction in any way. But there's one thing until we do something else that Bob can do, and that is if Alice has already sent Bob 20 coins and signed it, he could do the exact same transaction, the exact same data, and that signature would remain the same. So how do we keep Bob from basically saying Alice sends 20 coins to Bob? How do we keep him from posting that 20, 30 times? And so what Alice needs to do is have a unique number that she never uses on any other transactions. So every time she does a transaction, she comes up with just a unique number that will ensure that no two transactions are ever alike. If no two transactions are ever alike, then her signature will never be the same. And Bob, when he tries to do this, what the signature is going to be, if he tries to say, Alice sends 20 coins to me, here's the transaction number, he's got no idea what that signature should be. So as a quick aside, we're saying that Alice sends 20 coins to Bob. Well, that's not exactly how it works. A closer representation, we say address so-and-so sends 20 coins to address so-and-so. So that gives us something called pseudo-anonymity. Alice's name isn't necessarily attached to the transaction, so it provides people a certain degree of privacy. Now, if Alice does a business with a merchant and she's just reusing the same address over and over, that merchant may know who Alice is. And so that's what we call pseudo-anonymity. It's not complete anonymity. It can be broken if somebody ever links you to an address. But mostly with blockchain systems, people can use multiple addresses. There's different things they can do to further increase their anonymity. There's also some projects out there that actually have mathematically provable total anonymity as well. In the future meetup, we'll get into some of those. Okay, so how does a network know that a signature is valid? So, Alice sends the 20 coins to Bob, she's got her unique transaction ID, and she signs it with a good signature. How does the network, how can they check that? Well, that comes to our next function. It's called a verify function. And it's basically, they can check Alice's work. They can put in the message, they can put in Alice's public or signature that she's provided for the transaction, and they can put in Alice's public key. They can feed it through this function. It's basically a mathematical equation, and it spits out true or false. So if it spits out true, well, hey, that was Alice who signed that. If it spits out false, then to ignore the transaction. So again, this is how this might work. Alice broadcasts the transaction to the network, and this is Charlie. Charlie's one of the nodes on the network, and he's out there listening for transactions because there's a little bit. Charlie's hoping to make some money for helping people process things. Before he accepts Alice's transaction as true, then he runs that information through the verify function and sees whether it says true or false. So he can put in Alice's message, her signature that she's generated based on the message, her secret key, and Alice's public key. And if it says true, then hey, that was most likely signed by Alice, and I can trust that. Now, if Bob tried to do the same thing, again, he's not going to know what the signature is, and so all he can really do is try to guess. But the likelihood of him getting that guess right is just minuscule. Like I said, there's more stars in the universe than there are chances of you getting that guess right. And so, in all likelihood, if Charlie hears this fake transaction from Bob, it's going to come up as false. And he's going to ignore that. All right, there's one last function you need to know about, and this is the end of the real Heidi stuff, I think. This is called a cryptographic hash function. This is a function that's a lot like the sign function, except you don't have to sign it. You don't need a public key and you don't need a private key. You just put in your message and out comes a hash. So it runs some formulas and it spits out a number. The number is always going to be the same length. In this case, it's 256 bits, so 256 ones and zeros. Like the sign function, if you make a tiniest change in the input, then the hash comes out completely different. You can't look at the hash and know what was put into it. It's unpredictable in that way, although it is repeatable. And so you'll see how we can use this to protect our data. Let's say we have 3 transactions. They've all been properly signed. But maybe we can, if we want to cheat this system, we just try to ignore a transaction. Maybe we take this transaction on the right and not broadcast it to the network, or alter that on the blockchain sometime in the future. Well, if we run all these 3 transactions through the hash function all at once, out comes a number. If you make any change along the lines, so let's say you ignore a transaction, maybe you add a new transaction, that hash number is going to be wrong. So that's a way for people to already know. So you can create these programs that monitor the blocks. If something happens on the block, a certain type of record gets posted, that happens, you can make this happen with the program too. All right, so who makes the blocks? We kind of left that out. We said people are listening, and somebody is going to make this block and they're going to do the hashes and all that. Well, that depends on your consensus mechanisms. So that's basically the rules of your particular blockchain. That's the rules of the network. The rules state which blocks are valid. So what has to happen for this block to be considered a good block? How often the blocks are made? How many transactions go into a single block? How much people who process these blocks get paid? What data is required to be in the blocks? And they can incorporate some additional security features as well. So there's basically three main consensus mechanisms out there right now. There's actually more than that, but these are the three main ones. One is called proof of work, another is called proof of stake, and the third is called delegated proof of stake. So we're going to start out by looking at proof of work. The way proof of work is it's how Bitcoin works, and it's basically the winner of the competition, in all likelihood, gets to make a block and wins a prize. I'm going to start there because there's some details. This is the process called mining. So if you hear about people mining for Bitcoin or mining for Ethereum, this is kind of what they're doing. They're listening for broadcasted transactions. They're grouping the transactions into blocks. And in the case of proof of work, number 3 is the most important part. They're trying to find a number that when they place after the group transactions results in a hash that starts with a certain number of zeros. So maybe your hash has to start with 30 zeros or 40 zeros. And as we've seen, you can't really predict it, so you just got to start making a bunch of guesses. But if you happen to find that number, you're basically hollered bingo. And you broadcast that block, which would be considered valid because it meets the criteria, out to the network, and you may just get to profit. You may get to keep what's called a block reward, which in the case of Bitcoin, you get to basically print money out of thin air for having found this number that matches up with these transactions. And you get to keep the transaction fees that have been associated with the transactions. So if Alice and Bob and Charlie are all trying to spend some money, but Alice wants her thing to happen really right away. She wants it to be processed immediately. She may attach a transaction fee, which is kind of like her way to pay whoever processes that first. So if you're out there trying to group all these transactions into blocks, you're going to pick the ones that have the highest fees attached and do those first because you'll be the one you get the most money that way. So that's the process called mining. Now, this is an example of somebody trying to find this special number. On the left, we'll see this 4390817, and that's the first number somebody tries, and they put it after this group of transactions, and they run it all through the hash function, and out comes 1110011. Well, that didn't start with 10 zeros, so that's not considered a valid solution. So they just keep trying numbers until they finally hit on this number 325, and they put that after the group of transactions, run it all to the hash function, and guess what? The hash starts out with 10 zeros. Bingo! So they have a good chance of profiting off this block. So they broadcast it off the network, and they've got a real good shot at getting paid the block reward in the transactions. But there's one nuance that determines whether they really win or not. And that has to do with the chain length. So here, if we, each block, so let's say that's a prior block that's been mined on the blockchain. And somebody comes up with a new block that it matches up the last change, has the last block, it has its hash, it fits onto their block. When they do all the transactions, and they come up with a number, they hash it, it comes out with the right number of zeros. Well, if they come up with that, they're the first person to come up with that solution, then there's a good likelihood that they do win. And that's because there's a rule that says the longest chain is considered a valid chain. So if they come up with a block, the valid block, it makes the chain they're working off of longer. And so if they start processing for the next block, or if everybody takes notice of that and they start processing for the next block, they have a head start. The people on the second chain down here, if they ignored that new block and kept trying to find a new solution, well, they're behind. These folks are trying to solve the next block on a chain that's already longer. So they might as well just abandon efforts to on this bottom chain and just go with the longer chain, because that's how they're going to have the most likelihood of hitting the next valid block and actually getting to keep the rewards. So that's basically how Bitcoin consensus mechanism works. Now there's a lot of details I've left out, but the simplified version, this is basically how it works. So one of the things that Bitcoin solves, and it's one of the first it is the first cryptocurrency to solve this problem, it's called the double spend problem. Now here's an example of Sketchy Bob, and he's got some trickery up his sleeve. He's going to tell Alice that he's paying her 20 coins, but he's not going to tell the network. So Bob happens to, the moment he tells Alice, he happens to hit on one of these solutions that make for a valid block. And he tells Alice about this valid block that includes her transaction, but he doesn't tell anybody else. And the goal is, for Bob at least, is to keep that 20 coins. Nobody else knows but Alice, and be able to spend them somewhere else. So he's trying to double spend his money. Now, here's how Bitcoin basically prevents that. If Bob comes up with that solution, his problem is that everybody's going to rely on the longest chain. And so while he was messing around with that solution, people have been working on other solutions as well, and they've been lengthening the chain. Now Bob's chain, let's say it's only 3 blocks long, but Alice is only going to believe the longest chain. Well, in order for Bob to keep Alice fooled, he has to listen to more transactions. He has to do the math and find a new block. He has to keep doing that and doing that over and over so that he has the longest chain. Otherwise, Alice is just going to ignore that chain. The problem that Bob has is that he's competing against thousands or millions of other people that are all trying to solve this. They're adding on to this other chain. He can't keep up with all those folks. And so his chain is going to inevitably end up being the shortest chain, and Alice will eventually figure out, if she keeps listening to the network and hearing about this longer and longer chain, she'll know that, hey, this chain that Bob told me about, that one's bogus. I need to go with this chain that's longer, and it doesn't have Bob's transaction on it. So that's how Bitcoin prevents people from spending their money twice, the same money twice. We have 2 more consensus mechanisms. One's called, here's a summary proof of work. So it's a very energy intensive process. You have all these computers running all this processing power, and it uses a ton of energy to keep everything secure. But it is very, very secure. And on a side note, the difficulty of winning this lottery can be adjusted. They can say how many zeros have that special number has to start out with. Does it start with 2 zeros? Does it start with 20 zeros? It's a lot harder to find a hash that starts with 20 zeros than it is to find a hash that starts with 2 zeros. So they can change the incentive to mine by altering that. They can change how long it takes to discover it. They can change, by doing those things, they can change how often blocks are found, how fast transactions get processed, but it also affects how secure the protocol is. So the next consensus mechanism is called a proof of stake. Now this is basically like a lottery. Everybody who has a coin in the system gets a chance to win, I guess, as long as they're willing to make blocks. Whoever has the most coins basically gets the most chances. So it's like a raffle. If you bought 1,000 raffles tickets, you're more likely to win than the guy who has 2 raffle tickets. Now that gives the people who have the biggest stake an interest in making sure that the network is secure, and it also gives them an opportunity to win the most rewards as well. Now, Bitcoin stays secure by this proof of work that we talked about, running these numbers through the hashes and trying to get with all the zeros. It takes a lot of work to come up with a valid block. Well, they do away with that system of proof of stake. And basically what happens is whoever wins, they get to sign the block with their secure signature. So if you didn't win the block, then you don't have the right keys to make a valid signature for the block. You cannot protect the block. Now it's much less energy intensive than proof of work. Now the final consensus mechanism, this is what Lisk runs off of. What it does is the coin holders vote on delegates. And earlier I mentioned that Edward, who's going to speak to us in a moment, he is a Lisk delegate. So people with Lisk coins, they vote on who they want to be able to make blocks. And there's 101 delegates in Lisk that get to make blocks. They're assigned slots to listen for new transactions and make these blocks, and they just basically go around robin style, and they, whenever they make a block, they sign it with their signature. That's very energy efficient. It tends to be very fast. And unlike proof of stake, it gives the delegates, the people with the money, or the people who are forging blocks and getting rewards, it gives them an incentive to help the community. Remember, they're getting voted for. They have to earn those votes. So in Edward's case, he's doing a lot for the Lisk ecosystem, and so people are voting for him because he's sponsoring meetups, he's sponsoring scholarships, he's providing technical support, he's helping people with whatever Lisk problems they have. He's very active in the community, and so people will vote for him. And so he's getting to mine the blocks, and he gets to collect the rewards for mining the blocks. Now, in delegated proof of stake, the double spend problem is solved a little bit differently. Let's say Bob tries to fake this transaction. He's going to broadcast it to Alice, but he's not going to tell the network. Well, if Bob isn't a delegate, then he isn't able to sign the block. Only delegates have the valid signatures. So if somebody who's not a delegate tries to sign a block, then their block is considered invalid. So Bob isn't able to pretend like he sent money to Alice, but then not tell the network, and then later he just can't make blocks to broadcast in the first place. The only way Bob can get away with a double spend is basically if he steals all the delegates' keys and starts signing transactions himself. Otherwise, your blocks keep being made by delegates who do have keys, and Bob ends up with this chain that he just can't grow anymore because he can't sign the next block, and he can't sign the next block. All right, so in summary, we've seen that blockchain, it operates on it's a distributed database that different nodes on the network share. It has the characteristics of high availability, high data integrity. We've seen how public key cryptography is used to secure the blocks, how to show that the person who's making a transaction actually has authority to make that transaction. We've seen how the data gets organized into blocks and how hashes and signatures can protect those from being altered, and how that organization into blocks that everybody can access provides a high degree of auditability. They can check the transactions and see what's happening and keep track of everything. And you've seen how different consensus mechanisms are used to obtain agreement on the network, how we know which blocks are valid, and how we protect it from being altered, forged, defrauded. We've just scratched the surface. That pretty much concludes the intro, but there's a lot of things that we're going to be able to talk about in the future. These include smart contracts and programmable money. These include smart property, maybe that mortgage contract that transfers the house once all the mortgage payments are made. We can talk about blockchain applications that maybe they have their own programming logic, but every once in a while they need some data from a blockchain. They think that increased security, availability, auditability, that would be useful for their application. We can talk about how people issue coins to basically fund their own projects, maybe launch their own chain, or maybe incorporate into another chain. We can talk about how some of these concepts can build organizations that are programs that basically mimic organizations in the case of decentralized autonomous organizations. We can see how blockchain relates to the Internet of Things. Maybe you have door locks that operate depending on what happens to on the blockchain, or maybe the blockchain sends out a code to the door if something happens. You can see maybe Airbnb getting replaced by something operating on the blockchain. And you can even far out there and talk about blockchain and artificial intelligence. There's many use cases out there. So that concludes my intro. Does anybody have any questions right now?
There is a minor problem with it. It's just, you talked about guessing techniques, but what is the problem with it?
So the miner is trying to guess 10 digits so that they have the authority to mint a new block. Everybody wants to mint a block, but you've got to figure out how to determine who gets to mint a new block. So if the miner guesses a number that follows a bunch of transactions and they run it through their hash function and it comes out with 10, then they're the person who gets to make the new block. Now, not only does that decide who gets to make the block, but it also means it's very hard to make a block. So if somebody wants to start faking blocks, remember we saw those hashes get shown up on every block. Well, they've got to solve all these math problems faster than the entire network combined against them. So, because everybody else just keeps trying to solve these problems, and they can, as a whole, the network can solve it faster than any one fraudulent person. So it picks who makes the block and also provides the block a lot of security against somebody trying to fake blocks.
And a block is about the transactions.
Yes. In essence, it's a bunch of transactions placed end to end, and they usually whoever's attached to the highest fee, that's who the miner, or in the case of proof of stake, maybe they call them forgers. That's who gets to make the block.
So
And that's which transaction goes to the block. Sorry.
in proof of work, miners are like they're trying to guess the hash with like 10 zeros, right? And they can like use like graphics cards, like what people use for like online 3D games or whatever, right? To like parallelize it or whatever. But
Right.
with proof of stake, is that like CPU bound? So you could only do it like.
So in proof of stake, it can be done on a laptop. It could be done on a Raspberry Pi.
Whatnot. And after I had all of that, it all came together for me and it clicked. And I realized that at this moment, I was either going to get on board with this blockchain thing, this Bitcoin thing, and grow with it, or I was going to hear about it for probably the rest of my life. So I got involved, and since then I've helped mine and assisted in mining operations for everything from Bitcoin, Dogecoin to Redcoin and Vertcoin, and a few coins like Purecoin and Primecoin in between. I've also helped made it a point to myself to stay very informed in the cryptocurrency space and utilize some of my financial background to help explain the fundamentals of cryptocurrency. Obviously, you hear about Bitcoin, Litecoin, all these things. Well, they're all cryptocurrencies. The only reason any of this works is because of currency. Now, whenever you think of currency, gold is a common one that you think of immediately. It's been used since as early as 600 BC as a currency, likely because it had intrinsic value and it was hard to find. A lot of people liked it because it was shiny, it looked nice, nobility had it, so everyone else wanted it. And since you couldn't find it everywhere, it made it hard to find, made it valuable. Now this is a meme. This is pretty much the opposite of what you want for currency. It can be reproduced, it can be copied, you can make as many of them as you want. This particular meme was very popular in 2013, and you probably could not tell me if this was the original meme or a copy of the original meme. That you cannot verify. So, what do you think you get if you combine a meme and gold? Well, you get Dogecoin, or at least something probably close. The thing about Dogecoin is a joke currency. It was created literally as a joke. Some of the developers even refer to themselves as internet trolls. So they produce this currency, and even though it's a joke, this joke is worth $219 million. So years ago, when people were mining it for fun, and then all of a sudden we now actually have very wealthy individuals for mining this joke, eyebrows start to rise. You have to start to think, well, if the joke of this new technology is worth $200 million, then there has to be something to it. There has to be something to the technology as a whole. And what's important to that is that pretty much any cryptocurrency is better at being money than fiat currency like dollars that you know. These are the traits of money. The first four: divisibility, you have to be able to divide your money. Portability, you have to be able to transport your money. Durability, you want to make sure that your money doesn't rot away. Intrinsic value, you want to make sure that your money has some kind of worth other than what someone says it's worth. These first four were created and called the properties of sound money by Aristotle. Aristotle did this because for years before him, many philosophers had taken the time to decide what it was that made money sound. These first four properties worked pretty well for a while, but as society went on and developed, they needed some more properties of money. Fungibility, interchangeability. You want to make sure that your money is equal to what it is. A dollar is usually equal to a dollar, but a chicken could be 10 pounds, whereas another chicken is 5 pounds. You don't really want to trade a chicken for a chicken because they may not be the same. Security, you want to make sure that there's counterfeit protection. Is the currency that you're receiving actually secure? Is it easily transacted? Can you easily transfer your currency? And some people like to include that easily transacted also means being able to have a number of people or merchants accepting it. If you can't accept it, then it can't be easily transacted. Scarcity. This is a very big one in recent history because a lot of individuals like to invest. They like to know when they're investing, how much their investment is going to grow for future planning. Well, if it's not scarce and your currency can just be reproduced as much as you want, well, it's going to lower the value of your savings. And of course, whenever cryptocurrency was invented with Bitcoin, you had 3 new ones that kind of became an option for you. Sovereignty. Do you need to ask permission to use the system? Decentralized, as was explained earlier, is the system relying on a single point of failure, or is it distributed? So if you take one point out, it still works. And of course, what I think the most important aspect of cryptocurrency is that it's smart. You can program it. If the currency doesn't work for you today, we'll go make a new currency. Reprogram it and see if people want to use it tomorrow. So there's a few things that have been used as currency throughout human history, from stones to wood, various things. But the most common, of course, for a long time was gold. We'll go through it pretty quickly. Of course, gold is not very divisible. It's hard to break a gold coin in half. It's kind of portable. You can bring an ounce of gold around in your pocket, but do you really want to start carrying pounds of gold with you to go and do a simple transaction? No. Durability, obviously your gold's not going to go anywhere inside of your vault. Intrinsic value, it's used in numerous electronics, it's used in jewelry, there's various uses for gold itself. And fungibility. An ounce of gold, regardless of what shape it's in, is always going to be equivalent to an ounce of gold. And of course, security is moderate. When you get gold, you usually know what you're getting with gold, right? But you don't really know if it's 5 karat gold versus 10 karat gold versus 15 karat gold. You might if you're an expert, but most likely just on glance, you're not going to know. Easily transacted. You can't really bring gold bars around or bring them to a grocery store and probably have them accept it. And of course, scarcity is moderate. While gold is rare, a big problem with any ore or a raw mineral is that if there's a big find, it decreases the value. You can assume how much gold there is, but then all of a sudden in Mexico they find a new gold mine and gold goes down. And of course, sovereign is, you can ask permission for gold, but there's not very much gold lying around. If you just want to start using gold as a currency, you'd probably have to ask them up. Decentralized, it's not decentralized. Most gold is actually held in single locations like banks, like Fort Knox. And of course, it's not smart. You can't program it at all. Now you have fiat currency, of course, which is what everyone is most familiar with. Divisibility is moderate. You can break things down to a penny if you wish, but what if you want fractions of a cent? In a lot of online businesses, like a newspaper, you might only want to charge someone 1/10 of a cent for reading your page. But because of minimum fees and transaction costs, it's impossible to do. Of course, you have your durability. Fiat currency, especially digital fiat currency, is pretty good, but if you're talking about paper currency, it's very easy to burn paper. It's very easy for it to get destroyed. Your intrinsic value, of course, is low. I'm sure everyone's heard about the famous $1 trillion Zimbabwe dollar. Zimbabwe had hyperinflation, started printing out million, trillion dollar notes, and the only worth for that money was the worth in its cotton. They started using it as wallpaper. That was it. And of course, fungibility. $1 is equal to $1. $100 bill is changeable for a $100 bill. And security. It's moderate. Usually, funds and any kind of transaction is secure. But if you take, for example, large heists, like in 2015 in the country of Moldova, they have a modest GDP of $8 billion. One day, the accountant and the treasurer logged in. They were missing $1 billion. Completely off the books, completely gone, hacked, wiped away, and they can never find it. And of course, easily transacted. That is something for fiat. If you have American dollars especially, you can probably spend them almost anywhere. Scarcity? Biggest problem with fiat currency is it is low. When you have the Federal Reserve or centralized banks that continuously print money, you never actually know how much there's going to be. In the case of the Federal Reserve, they have all these meetings and we have to wait for an announcement on the news for them to tell us what inflation rates may be next year. When it comes to doing long-term investments, not knowing how much of your investment there is very problematic. And of course, is it sovereign? In most cases, to use a bank account or to use digital fiat currency, you need permission from someone. If you get blacklisted from a bank, if you get blacklisted from an insurance company and anything like that, you're done for. You can no longer use the currency without debt collectors, for example, coming down on you. And of course, decentralized, as we know with central banks, it is highly centralized. Our financial and monetary policy is determined by members of the Federal Reserve, and we never even get to hear any of their reports on how they determine these decisions. And of course, smart. You cannot program fiat currency. Now we have Bitcoin. Obviously, we're going to use Bitcoin, but this is for cryptocurrency mostly in general. Divisibility. You can break it down into 8 decimal places. And if you need to, you can program in more decimal places without adjusting the total monetary supply. Portable, you can keep it on a flash drive. You can keep $1 million on a piece of paper. Keep it in your phone. Completely and easily lightweight, easy to port around. Durability, as long as the miners continue to run the network, your Bitcoin will always exist. As long as there are miners going. 1,000 years, if there were still miners mining it, it will still be there. And intrinsic value. This one gets argued a lot because it's kind of a catch-22 when it comes to intrinsic value. Because Bitcoin's intrinsic value is in its ability to transfer value. So according to Satoshi Nakamoto, as soon as you have 2 individuals who perceive Bitcoin as having value, and one of them sends it to the other, then Bitcoin was a success. The reason it's a catch-22 is the value is in that. At the very first transaction, I believe it was 10,000 Bitcoin for a pizza. But it required someone to make that first transaction its intrinsic value to eventually build on itself, kind of as a feedback mechanism. And of course, secure. We've talked about that before with the blockchains. The whole purpose is that you cannot hack a Bitcoin address. If you use every single computer on the planet and put them all together trying to find out these hashes or trying to brute force your address, the sun will burn out before they probably find it. And of course you have easily transacted. You can scan a QR code, make a payment. You can send a payment across to China in less than 10 minutes. Incredibly easy to transact. You could argue that there's not a lot of grocery stores maybe, or you can't walk into a bar and give them cryptocurrency. But the biggest thing about digital currencies is that they're useful in the digital market. So while you may not have your mom and pop store accepting cryptocurrency, although they could, you have people like Reddit, or you have large organizations like Forbes looking into their 1 million users being able to pay them with Bitcoin. And of course, we have scarcity. It's built into Bitcoin's protocol, along with almost every protocol, that you know exactly how many of that currency is going to be created. In the case of Bitcoin, there's 21 million that will be created. In the case of some of the other ones, they tell you what the inflation rate will be, 2%, 1%. You know what it's going to be, and you can plan for it. Sovereign. You don't need permission to use Bitcoin. So on GitHub, it's open source. You go download it, you can start using it. The same for almost every other cryptocurrency. You need no permission to use it. Decentralized, that's one of the main purposes of using it, is that all the nodes are decentralized. If you take out one node, it doesn't do anything to the network. You need to take the majority or all of the nodes out. And of course, smart. As you can tell, it's almost as if this currency was made and programmed to be a good currency. Now right here you see we have the US dollar's purchasing power over the last 100 years. Something to take note of this is a logarithmic scale. So as you can tell, this is $1 to 10 cents, but then this is 1 cent to 10 cents. So over the last 100 years, if you were to make this $1, the current purchasing power of your dollar is about 6 cents to the dollar. There's a few reasons for this. Some of the major are right here in 1929, you had the Great Depression. The United States was able to get us out of the Great Depression, arguably, because they started to decouple the US dollar from gold and started printing money to be able to pay off debts. As you can see, 1933, when this occurred, it had a significant effect. And then again, in 1973, Nixon completely abolished the connection from gold to the US dollar, where at this point, only banks and foreign entities could change dollars for gold, but Nixon made that where that was gone as well. And as you can see, this had an incredible effect on the US dollar now that there was absolutely no intrinsic value to it. This is the total market cap of all of the cryptocurrencies combined. Now Bitcoin is only 8 years old. All cryptocurrency is not even 10 years old. So when I show you this, it's just to show you the amount of interest and perceived value in cryptocurrency. It's also to warn you. One of the reasons I'm helping discuss this with you is because we'd like everyone to know the fundamentals and also realize that this is very speculative. If you're hoping to go and buy cryptocurrency and make 1,000 times gains, you probably missed the boat. But if you wanted to invest in something that you knew was going to gain value over time, unlike the US dollar, unlike maybe even silver or gold, you can invest in cryptocurrency and know and plan for your financial security. But again, I showed you this just to show that there's a lot of speculation. There is a lot of interest now that the market cap almost reached what is it now? $75–80 billion. But again, make sure you do your due diligence. Read into your cryptocurrencies, read into what they do, because again, I got into cryptocurrency not because I wanted to make a lot of money. It was because I had a dream, a vision. I saw the vision and I joined it. This right here is just a list of as many companies as I could find that accepted Bitcoin, at least at one point. Something you'll notice about a lot of them is most of them are internet companies. This is from Coinbase. They kind of act as PayPal for cryptocurrency. And they tout having 46,000 businesses accepting Bitcoin through them, with several big companies like Reddit, PayPal, Mozilla, Expedia, a lot of very large companies. Now, when it comes to digital currencies, you don't need a lot of companies to be accepting them when you have massive companies doing the job. Looking forward, this is a picture of the account penetration around the world. The darker red it is, the less adults have access to bank accounts. The biggest thing about this is, according to the IMF, there's 2 billion unbanked adults in the world. On top of this, every day, thousands and thousands of new individuals gain access to the internet, which makes these 2 billion unbanked individuals the perfect target for cryptocurrency. A lot of people like to think, well, cryptocurrency, maybe that's only for first world areas. Well, in places like India, for example, they have a massive project where they're going to see almost 1 billion people in India online in 3 years. When it comes to digital currencies and things like that, it's not necessarily for you in a first world nation. You can use it, but you have a bank on every corner. You have an ATM around every other corner. But when it comes to a lot of these other countries that they don't even have a choice, cryptocurrencies may be their only option. And in conclusion, the favorite thing, as I said earlier, about cryptocurrency, it's programmable. If you don't like one cryptocurrency, go make another one. There's literally thousands of cryptocurrencies active right now. You'll only find maybe a few hundred of them actually being traded, but there's people just sitting around and they want to make a cryptocurrency, they make it. That's the best part about it. Programming your own money. And of course, special thanks to Lisk. Without them, I wouldn't even be here to help explain this to you. And they just want to help raise awareness of blockchain technology in general. So thanks, and if you have any questions. Yes?
Are we talking about blockchain, the capital B, or blockchain, is an organization called blockchain?
No, blockchain is the name for the underlying technology behind most cryptocurrencies. The idea of, I believe we passed out sheets earlier that have some terms on them. The blockchain is essentially combining all of the signatures, putting them together, and putting them in blocks which are chained together.
But nobody's gone out there and made a company called blockchain. It's really confusing.
There is.
There is actually a company called Blockchain.
That's what he was
That's
asking.
what I'm
Oh yes, there is a company called Blockchain, but when I refer to blockchain, I mean the underlying technology of blockchain, so lowercase b.
Who is this?
Because when I went to-
Boycott them just because they.
You could boycott them, but there's not really much you can do about it.
I understand.
We're not-
Boycott them.
You can boycott them, yes.
So
We're
where is
not
this?
talking about the company, we're talking about the technologies or the protocol.
Yes, we're talking about the protocol, yes. Any other questions?
Yeah, that's what you can follow the next dynasty. Yeah, this is
For example, Dogecoin, it has the fastest transaction speeds of any of the cryptocurrencies. You have a cryptocurrency like Lisk, where they have the delegated proof of stake, where they try and say that this is better if you vote in the delegates rather than having miners. You have some like Vertcoin, which are ASIC resistant, so it's harder for you to use a very large computer to mine it. So there's various different things that you can get from your cryptocurrencies. You really just have to have due diligence, because as I said, there's so many of them, and they all do many different things.
one thing I just wanted to bring up too that kind of went along with some of the stuff you were saying is that when in this blockchain democracy, and this is such a beautiful thing, is that when there is a disagreement between, say, the two chains, maybe one of them wants to implement a new feature and the other one does not, after they finally do reach the point where they implement those changes, they can actually take their collective value both elsewhere, and there's no loser in the elections. Once the decision is made, both chains can maintain themselves separately with their own version of the idea. So in that democracy, everyone gets to take their own collective value elsewhere, and there's no loser.
So when the DAO split, did they both continue? You know, when Ethereum split?
It sure did. Ethereum Classic and Ethereum together are worth more now than they were before.
So speaking of the DAO, does it just stand for decentralized autonomous organization?
Yes, as he was talking about people stealing names, yes, the DAO was a decentralized autonomous organization called a decentralized autonomous organization.
And it was hacked, right? Was there a vulnerability in the
Yes, there was a vulnerability built into the protocol, and as soon as it started running, the hacker actually claimed to be a white hat, and he claimed that he was doing everyone a favor by telling everyone that he was hacking them.
Well, the same thing's happening here. You can hack. The platforms are able to, they have the algorithm. They can say that we can hold the price at this price when we find a sell. They're buying and selling in the same
Yes, you can have some people manipulate the market, but in the sake of these decentralized autonomous organizations, ICOs with these initial coin offerings, these are centralized programs built onto decentralized systems. So you can use a decentralized network, and if you build a sidechain and that sidechain is built around a single business, then you kind of defeated the purpose of having the decentralized network. Now, it is worth it to do this, but like I said, it adds more risk.
Banks kind of want to do that, to transfer money between banks, right? There would be kind of a private blockchain.
That's what Ripple's for.
Really?
Using it as a clearinghouse, right?
A clearinghouse?
Oh, and but I think we're limited on time, so I'm going to pass this on to Evan.
Thank you very much.
All right, everyone. My name is Edward. I'm the Lisk U.S. Ambassador. I'm very happy to be here in San Antonio. Thank you so much for coming. And I have an excellent presentation for y'all about what is Lisk, a history, and also the future. So first and foremost, what is Lisk? Lisk is a blockchain application platform. It's based in JavaScript and Node.js. This is one of the most accessible sets of languages in the entire world. That means that more developers will be able to understand the code of the blockchain than any other blockchain project to date. So in January of 2016, there was a problem to solve. Entry into the blockchain development field is hard. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and it takes extensive knowledge. You'd have to A, be a developer, and B, understand blockchain tech. That's a whole lot. So the idea was to create a framework such as Rails or Django for traditional programming for the blockchain. Max Kordek and Oliver Beddoes, the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Technology Officer of Lisk, decided that they would tackle this idea. And so they launched an initial coin offering. An initial coin offering is essentially a crowd sale of a token. In this sale, 14,000 Bitcoin were exchanged for 100 million Lisk. And now those 100 million Lisk are live on the network as of May 2016. And since then, we've managed 1,000 nodes added to the network, 250,000 transactions, almost $500 million in volume, and now 60 core releases. So in November of 2016, these funds finally became available because Lisk was able to establish a nonprofit. They tried to pioneer the blockchain nonprofit in Germany, and they would have been the first. However, they weren't successful, so they eventually did settle for Switzerland, like many other projects have, including Ethereum and others. Since then, they've made quick work, and they've hired a team of members from 12 different countries, and as you can see here, it's many different flags, and a very talented group here. They're working very, very hard. So in June of this year, we've had 2 major product releases. We've had Lisk Nano, which is the light wallet for Lisk. It allows you to do voting, which has been mentioned a little bit earlier, also transactions, signing messages, etc. The basic functions of the network. That was one major milestone, and now we have released Lisk 0.9. So we don't have a major release of Lisk yet. That's how early it is. So it is very, very early for developers, investors, etc. to take a look at this. But the Lisk 1.0 release is coming within a short period of time, maybe 1 or 2 months. As of July, Relevance, a strategic rebranding company, has been working with Lisk to reschedule release schedules and figure out their strategies for the future for the most part. Takio Naten is also working on a creative rebranding for Lisk. They're basically going to redo interfaces, all of their, the way the Explorer looks, advertisement, just about any public appearance stuff. They're really working hard to make this look good.
These are other companies helping out with?
Yes, these are partnerships, exactly. So a little bit to the future, in December of 2017, we'll have most of the parts we need for this to be a fully functioning machine. And a blockchain application platform, at least for Lisk, exists in 3 parts. The blockchain database, which is composed of PostgreSQL, the smart contracts backend, which will be in Node.js, and then the user interface, which would be HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And the SDK is going to provide the complete package which is a software development kit, for developers to easily deploy their own blockchain applications without having to reinvent the wheel, without having to, know so much about blockchain development in and of itself. They can just apply their JavaScript knowledge and make an app. So here's a really great comparison as to what Lisk is actually doing. You see at the top here, Ethereum. As Ethereum goes along, the chain compiles all the financial transactions, the smart contracts, and the applications into one layer. This becomes quite congested for a chain. Seeing as how Bitcoin is already having a problem scaling and the size of the chain just with financial transactions, seeing how a chain that's compiling smart contracts, applications, and financial data into one chain, it starts to have an issue with scaling. You see, there's a problem there. And Ethereum starting to see that. With Lisk, the financial data, for the most part, is the only thing that is being done on the main chain. And then it has the ability to deploy side chains, which are actually Node.js child processes, and that's why the side chains are innately possible with Lisk, because of the design of the child processes within Node.js. So this is basically the scaling solution that the blockchain field's been looking for, side chains. Bitcoin, there actually are proposals to add side chains to Bitcoin, but as you can see, Bitcoin's been made extremely rigid for a reason, so that the fundamentals and, for you said, the investment ideals of it can't be changed very easily, and so that's why it's been made so rigid. So lastly, with Lisk, the future holds for us, obviously, the fully featured blockchain application platform. There will also be a full ICO suite, so if you come up with an asset you would like to sell or a new idea, you can sell your token without even having to use JavaScript. This is going to be basically something you can register a token and use it within the platform.